Hello, my name is Cindy, and I was asked by a friend to talk about how to meet Jesus. Well, the only thing I can do is give you my story, so we'll start there. I was born in Buffalo, New York, into a family that was quite dysfunctional and somewhat abusive. My childhood was not good. I knew nothing about Jesus. I had no religious upbringing at all. About three times as I was a child, my mom would dress us up in little dresses, and my dad would take us down to the church at the corner on Easter Sunday. I had attention deficit disorder, so I had no idea what the pastor was saying, but I did know who had a new Easter bonnet on and who had black shoes on and who had brown shoes on. That was my religious upbringing. It continued a few years later when I found a Bible at my house and I was with my sister and I said, "Watch this." And I put my right hand on the Bible and raised my left hand and said, "I swear to never eat another jelly bean." And then I picked up a handful of jelly beans from the bag and shoved them in my mouth and chewed away happily. I don't remember what happened after that, but I was still alive, which is good. Flash forward a few more years. I left home at 17. I got married at 19. And at 20 years old, my husband and I packed up what we had and got as far away from Buffalo, New York as we could. We went out to San Diego, California, and established a life. Over the next few years, things just muddled along. He was not a good guy. He had an explosive temper, and I spent a lot of time trying to be cheerful and clean up any messes that he made. We ended up a few years later in Salt Lake City, Utah. His business had transferred him up there, and we now had two children. One was a toddler, and the other was 4 years old. I was working downtown at a place for a collections department, and I worked with a girl named Shirley. Shirley drove me nuts. Shirley talked about God all the time. She would always grab me when she was going down for a bagel or a donut and a cup of coffee. And I wanted the cup of coffee, but I did not want to hear her God stories. And on she'd go, very monotonous. Then she began talking to God like she knew him, like God told me this and God said that. And that fried me. I didn't need that in my life. I had two children. My husband had a pretty good business. We had friends. We partied and we had cars and a home. And I didn't have time for all this. Well, by Easter time, I was not doing well with Dave, my husband. I was overwhelmed with trying to do everything and be all things to all people. And she kept inviting me to church. So I showed up at her church, a small Lutheran church, on a Good Friday. I walked into a church for the first time. I was 30 years old for the first time in 25 years, and the cross was all draped in black. I had all I could do to not turn around and leave. This was not the kind of experience I was expecting. But I sat down and I played the good girl. And I saw the preacher as he walked forward to the front, and he had a long robe on, and that was in black. Everything was in black. And he began preaching. And I don't know what he said. I had no idea. I was so concerned about being there. I was so concerned about what was going on that I wasn't listening to a word he was saying. But then all of a sudden, I heard a few words, and he said, "Jesus did this because he loves you." And he put the emphasis on he loves you. Interesting, I thought. So I got out to my car. I was driving an old Volkswagen Bug at the time, and I got into the car and I broke. I don't know, well, I do now, but I did not know what was going on. I just started bawling my eyes out. And then I started saying, "You love me. You love me." And for the first time in my life, I realized there was someone that truly loved me. See, we're all made by God, created by Him, but He makes us with a hole inside of us. I call it the God shaped hole in our hearts that can't be filled with anything else. And I had spent years trying to be the good wife, the perfect mom, to work, to make sure that everybody was happy, I had friends, I had it all, and I still had that God-shaped hole inside of me. And I realized at that moment that the only one that could fill that hole was Jesus himself. And I didn't pray a prayer. I didn't have a little tract that gave me messages. I didn't have anybody whispering in my ear what prayer I should pray. All I did was put my hands on the steering wheel and cry like a baby and say, "You loved me. You love me. You love me." And I probably sat there for 20 to 25 minutes just crying and letting it wash over me that Jesus died for me because he loved me. I went home and I didn't mention it to Dave, and I went on with life. I think I did tell Shirley something happened, but I didn't tell her too much because I certainly didn't want to open that can of worms. A few days later, the pastor called and he said, "I noticed you were in church and I'd like to come and see you." Well, I'm not a no person, so I said, "Sure." And then I warned Dave, he's coming over. Well, Dave said, "That's fine, but he's not getting my money. I'm not going to quit drinking, and I don't really want to listen to what he said." I said, "Perfect. This night's going to go real well." So he came in and he sat on the sofa. And the first thing that happened was my cat came running out of the bedroom, jumped on the curtains, and ran to the top and hung there like a monkey. I was so embarrassed. I was convinced that no pastor in the world has a cat that jumps up on the curtains and hangs there like a monkey. And here I was standing there trying to explain to the pastor who was saying, "It's okay, it's okay." But I was so worried about making a bad impression. The pastor spent time with me that night, telling me what had taken place, what had happened, and asking me if I wanted to know Jesus. And I said, "Yes, yes, yes." I attended that church, and a few months later, Dave did come to the Lord, and we decided the best thing we could do was to head back down to San Diego, which we did. So, with about 40 bucks in our pockets, we drove down to San Diego with two kids and a dog and landed at a place and ended up in a small Wesleyan church. And the pastor again came and asked me my story, and I told him I had accepted the Lord. I knew nothing, but I'm here. And he put me into a Sunday school class, and the class was Foundations of Your Faith. And it was through the Bible in 1 year. And I said, "Sure, I'll do that." So we joined that. It took 2 years to get through it, but it taught us all we needed to know at the time to get us going in the right direction. So I've never looked back. That was 40 years ago. And I am still in love with the man who gave his life to me and filled that God-shaped hole. Not everything has gone perfect. I have suffered a lot of loss in my life and a lot of heartbreak. And there have been times where I've been on my knees crying, "Why? Why?" And maybe I'll get to that in other videos. But what I wanted to address in this video was when he found me and he filled that God-shaped hole. And it wasn't through some program or some special evangelist that came to speak or anything. It was because I needed him, and he heard my cry, and he came to me, and he filled that God-shaped hole. So if you're looking for him, you don't need to go any farther. You don't need to find the perfect church. You don't need to read any special kind of book. You don't need to do anything except say, "God, my heart hurts. I have a hole in my heart that only you can fill. Come to me and love me. I'm asking you to love me." And I can guarantee he will be there. Over the next few videos, I've decided that what I want to do is I want to present some videos on, now that you've said that, which is, quote, the salvation prayer by asking him to come into your heart. Now what? How do you get started? What do you do? How do you learn? Where do you turn? Because those are things that, yeah, someone has to guide you along the way. I'm going to make the assumption at this point that you still have internet, but I'm also going to provide some things for you to do in case you don't. There's a great possibility that if you are watching this at some date in the future, that the rapture, or what they refer to the rapture, has already taken place for the bride. and there will be many who will have disappeared, and you will have plenty of questions. What I want to do is I want to provide support and guidance and learning for you so that you can figure out this walk, because it's not easy, but you need to do it. You need to do it because you will not get through this on your own strength. So that's my word. That's what I'm sticking with today. I hope that answers the question on how you do it. You just do. You just say, I need you. Come in and fill me. And he will. He never disappoints. I care for you all, and I hope you are doing well. Good night.